folks, and hey, also to any hyperdimensional interlopers posing as folks. I'm Layman Pascal, and you are listening to, or listening with, or listening at the Integral Stages author series where we take prepositions seriously. Today I'm joined by Nava Israel, who is an author, a sucker for patterns, a friend of Marina Fadak, a facilitator, an instinctive philosopher, a cultural competency trainer, and she's here to help us awaken from our system-induced stupor by exploring her book, CONEtrolled, How We've Lost Our Freedom and How to Reclaim It. Hi, Nava.
Hi, Layman. It is a pleasure being with you here. Thank you so much for having me.
So, you've spent a lifetime generalizing patterns found across populations. And the way you've found to make sense of this stuff is to develop a metasystemic transdisciplinary analysis of a multi-layered, multi-phase evolving structure that can be pictured as a cone with core certainties as the wide bottom, giving rise to the emergent perception of problems, leading to the clarifying of needs, the implementing of solutions, maybe competition between solutions, the enshrinement of solutions into systems, and then the ossification or narrowing of systems into dogmas and inflexible, oversimplified strategies. And this cone obviously has a certain resemblance to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which features in the book. And my question, which is a little bit flippant, is this. Do you think the roundness of cones indicates a more gender-balanced mode of sense-making compared to the sharp-angled straight lines of a pyramid?
I love your question. um, hmm. Well, maybe subconsciously, but there was actually a reason why it was a three-dimensional cone, albeit it could have been a pyramid. So maybe there is something to what you're saying, the roundness and the feminine. But the reason it is a cone, which is a three-dimensional structure, is because this system, this dogmatic system that the cone represents, the controlling and oppressive system, it contains us, right? It contains its subjects, I call it, in the model. So it doesn't just indicate the stages and how we got to that point where we are all locked in, but also it represents an enclosed structure where we are trapped and where we don't necessarily see that we are trapped. We can't see outside of it. It creates our own reality inside of it. And therefore, it is a three-dimensional model and not a two-dimensional triangle kind of thing. That is the reason. But hey, I like the spheric thing.
Are we fundamentally trying to get out of cones, or are we trying to get better cones?
Wow. Yes. Yes. Sadly, I mean, gladly the first yes, sadly the second yes. So what happens with the cones and us is that, first of all, I don't think that there is a single individual, well, maybe a few, maybe you, who are not trapped in one type of cone or another. They are everywhere. These structures that tell us what to think, tell us what to believe, dictate how to behave, show us what to be ashamed of, silence those who don't, etc. These cones, they are everywhere, on every level of our lives. And most of them are invisible. I mean, even think about an extreme cone, like, the governance in North Korea, right? Like when you look from the outside, there is no doubt in anyone's mind that this is one of the tyrannical cones that are hyper controlling, punitive, etc., where people cannot leave, all the classic one. But people who live inside of North Korea, some of them know it and others don't. Right? And so the question, are we trying to get out of cones all the time, depends on who, right? The rebels, the awakened ones, the ones who can tell that they are inside a cone, they definitely want to either topple it, burn it, leave it, right? So that, but the majority don't know that they are inside of cones. For them, for us, for most of us, it is what we call normal life, right? And normal life isn't always sweet. It isn't always the best. Well, what can we do? You know, that's life. That's what the cones persuade us, right? That's life. You know, good, bad, everything in between. That's just life. But that's a lie. And so the ones who awaken inside these cones become the rebels, or what I called the internal traitors, right? Because they are perceived as traitors. They want to leave, or they want to burn it down. But then what happens is that cones reincarnate, right? Cones rebuild themselves, and they rebuild themselves, you know, uncannily consistently. Because what happens is that when we burn a cone down, or when we leave it with anger and vengeance and insult, right, and trauma unhealed, what we do is we bring all that negativity and all this anger and victimization into the next solution that we build. And when you bring all of that shit, pardon me, into the next stage of your life, all you do is you build the next cone in line. And you may not be aware of it. I mean, most of us aren't aware of it. Most of us feel justified. You know, most of us feel righteous in leaving that old cone. And then we build the next one. And if you look back at our history, it is rife with one cone after the next, after the next, after the next. And each of them looks a little bit different. Some of them are almost identical. Some of them are completely contrary, but still a cone. And so the whole idea, I think, of my book is really for us to make notice, right? To notice this pernicious dynamic that we are responsible for, right? We have no one to blame but ourselves, simply because collectively we build them, we enable them, and then we serve them and worship them, right?
So I'm imagining these cones undergoing rebellion and running into circumstantial problems that lead to their failure, and then coming apart and then regenerating themselves with a slightly different look. But I'm also thinking about the way that populations break up into something like liberal, progressive, and conservative factions. Because the conservative argument is often the cone we've got is not working. Let's go back to a previous cone that might have been working better. Is
The
it
good old
possible to
days.
go back? Or right, are there old cones we can return to, or are they actually talking about going to a new cone and they're just calling it an old cone?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. And I think when your question is about the conservative look on life, and we won't name it as a political movement necessarily, but as a worldview, right? We have different motives that drive us to build cones. And these are common motives to humanity. And it all depends on who inflames it in us, right? If there are clever, manipulative people and organizations that inflame fear, shame, guilt, fear of the uncertainty, scarcity, there's not enough for everyone, the others are taking it from you, the divide and conquer, you know, all these ploys that make us scared human beings that are looking for a savior, many of us will then lean back into nostalgia. Now, nostalgia is a lie, right? I know that there's this common question. If you could go back in history to any period, where would you go? And I'm like, not even to yesterday. Nowhere in the past would I want to live, especially as a woman, like today, with all its disadvantages, is probably the best time in history that we've had in, I don't know, 10,000 years, probably, at least in what we call the Western industrialized countries. Because, slavery and racism and misogyny and everything, it has become better. So this idealization of the past, oh, things used to be so much better. That's a lie. That's a lie that we tell ourselves, that our brain sort of rejigs as we age, usually, where we remember only the good things. And even if they didn't exist, we beautify them. And of course, the profiteers, the ones who want us, to obey, to go along with their crazy ideas, they want us to lean on the good old days and believe that it was so much better and now everything has gone to shit. And look at the young generation, so disrespectful, blah, 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 right? All these Gen Zs, they don't know what they're doing. Like the things that we've been hearing from elders 2,000 years. So I think that this, going back to your question, the conservative, again, I will call it ploy, to make us believe that it used to be better, and if we just bring it back, everything will be peachy. That's a lie and they know it's a lie, right? Call masters are not, well, some of them are delusional people, but those who really drive the cone are not delusional people. They are very well aware of what they're doing. They are doing it on purpose. They are manipulators, and they are devoid of any empathy. And whichever of us will pay the price, it's just fine by them, right? So to me, the conservative leaning on the past is a blatant lie. It is a lie. It is a manipulation that plays to our bias. And therefore, we need to be aware of that. Yeah. I hope I answered your question.
I think so. Each of the layers, as a process transitions, there seems to be room for these profiteers and manipulators to distort the information that's moving up through the cone. Like somebody can come in and you have these core certainties, but you haven't formulated the problems yet, and they can formulate the problems in a way that serves them rather than your actual needs.
Mm-hmm.
But once that's happened, those are the problems and needs that just pop up for you, right? And to be skeptical of that and to try to outthink that costs you a great deal of extra time and energy and attention. How do we deal with that? Does everybody have to do a little bit more, or do we need specialized people that are skeptical of that for us? Because it seems to the average person that would be an exhausting process to try to figure out what are the distortions in their apparent problems and needs.
That is so true. It's difficult. There is no magic bullet for that. But there are many smaller things that we can put in place. I think one of the fundamentals is education. And, when we are educated within systems that actually discourage questioning and critical thinking, which is sadly what's happening in the educational system, generally speaking, even though that is not the claim of the educational system, the hyperstructure, the rote, you have to memorize everything. Yes, sure, you can ask a question, but not if it's considered to be an inflammatory one. Then you're just a troublemaker, right? So there is this whole, and I will measure you based on very given standards, and you have to push yourself into the 10 pigeonholes I have created for you. And if you are outside of these pigeonholes, you are a troublemaker. And if you're a troublemaker, we will put you on drugs, we will, mandate therapy, whatever it is. So the educational system is a major, major cone that guides our very ability to question these things. And so what happens is that when we are educated and we grow up also in other cones, not just education. So let's say you grow up in a very hierarchical culture or mini culture of your family, your community, your religion, your country. And what you're told is listen to your elders, obey, right? Don't ask the difficult questions. You grow up with the combination of these systems to disable you from ever asking the difficult questions and to view authority as the ultimate power and the ultimate trustworthy system. And so our ability to question these manipulators and these profiteers who create problems for us, who tell us that something is a problem, right? Because sometimes it's an existing problem that they just augment, and sometimes there's no problem and they invent it because it serves their purpose. If we grew up, and our personality as well, right? Because you may have grown up in all kinds of oppressive environments, but you have this emotional and intellectual immunity to manipulation and lies. You will see through that veil. But how many of us are like that, right? The majority will regard the lies as truths. And as you said, we don't have the time. We don't have always the personal capacity to question and to analyze and to seek multiple sources of information. And between us, how do you even know which sources of information to believe to or not? Like nowadays, it's a jungle, right, of information and disinformation. So yeah, for most of us, it is very difficult. And what I call the cone masters, the manipulators, the puppeteers, they capitalize on that, right? They know it. They are actually partially responsible for flooding us with nonsense so that we can no longer tell truth from lies, nor do we wish to try. We just need an authority to tell us and off we go, right? So it's difficult. What are the solutions to that? Well, the solutions are, first of all, to know that this exists, right? This is sort of and that's actually the purpose of my book. We are going to commercials. This is my book. The purpose of my book is really to open people's eyes to this reality. It's not a highly philosophical book that speaks about, some of the things that you and I may speak about, the bigger, the higher awakening. This is really about not awakening. This is about waking up. It's sort of the first stage of waking up. So one is we need to start reading more of these, not necessarily this, but there's so much out there that speaks about these lying systems, these hyper-controlling systems. We need to start asking the difficult questions and not get deterred when we are shamed and that's tough, by the way, that's tough. And I think just recently we have seen, with everything that happened with COVID, which is still that word that then when you say it, someone censors you somewhere, right? And God forbid you speak about vaccines, like that's a big no-no. These are all signs of cones that silence you, that don't want people to ask the difficult questions. And these are all legitimate questions. But once a legitimate question makes you a heretic, that's like the big waving red flag of you're dealing with a cone that silences you, right? But we can't break through and we can't leave a cone unless we start asking these questions and being willing to take the consequences of asking these questions. But there are ways, because none of us is alone. None of us is an island, even though that's what cones want us to believe, that if you are a cone heretic, if you are an internal traitor, you are on your own. There are so many of us out there, the cone heretics, who wish to see a better life. And so, find your people, find your tribe where you don't feel crazy, or made to feel crazy. These are so the initial steps, but there are many, many others that we can take. But these are like the baby steps out and away.
So we need to encourage awareness of how these things operate. We need to have an attitudinal change where we feel good about being heretics and traitors to a certain degree. There's this other element of it that I'm looking at and going, okay, there is a kind of a natural process whereby cones fail over time. Because the solutions, they might have started with the wrong problems. They might have gotten the wrong solutions. We have this thing in our brains called survivor bias, where we think that whatever attributes success had is a good strategy, but it might turn out to be completely independent of succeeding. So at some point, the cone will fail, especially if it's become overly rigid and dogmatic. But there appear to be very large cones at play in the world that might not crumble before the entire system is disrupted. Which cones are you most worried about over the next, say, 10 to 20 years? Cones which probably would fail if we gave them enough time, but they might not fail in time.
Yeah, a great question. Well, there are many of them, but if I have to pick sort of the biggest and the most destructive ones on large scales, right? So one of the things that we really need to wake up to and realize is that we no longer live in democracies. I don't know that we ever have, but today we are such staunch believers in the fact that we live in democracies where they are nothing of the sort, these governance systems. We live under corporatocracy, which is the governance of corporates. Because our governments, I love someone, I can't remember who, once said that our politicians have to dress up like race drivers. They should have all the logos of those who sponsored them so that we know who bought them. And I think this is the sad truth of it. Our governments are governed by much greater powers, much greater structures that are the World Bank and, all kinds of hidden organizations that I don't even know about them, but they are economic organizations that puppeteer governments, right? And some of them are affiliated with a government that supports these structures, and some of them are way above these governments, and they are the ones who puppeteer our governments, our so-called democracies. Because, and so to me, that is the greatest risk that we are now facing, because these financial organizations are psychopaths by any measure that you diagnose them, right? They are psychopaths because they have no empathy. They are okay with leaving this earth a scorched earth if it gives them power, because they already have their rockets to to fly to Mars and do their damage there, or they have their bunkers that will sustain them for the next 200 years, should the upcoming calamity actually happens. So they really don't care about the consequences of their actions, so long as whatever they're doing benefits them, gives them more power, gives them more money, gives them that illusion of immortality, right? And so to me, this is the economy, these hyper economic bodies, the corporates that govern everything. They govern our food supply. They govern our environmental safety. They govern our energy sources. They govern our politicians, who govern how we obey, who punish those who stand up to them, right? So if I had to pick one, that would be the one. That would be the one. They are the ones who govern education, like everything, basically everything. They are the ones who create wars. You know, they puppeteer the politics around the world, because when one is going to war with another, first of all, you can sell them arms and ammunitions, you can get them into debt, you can put your military there, you can create your new conglomerate. It's like it's unbelievable how many tiers they are controlling, almost everything. So that would be it, in my mind. What do you think?
Mm, yeah, that one's definitely a huge one. I think one of the problems is we might not even be able to see some of the major cones that are driving the problem. They might be concealed.
Oh, completely.
Um, I think we face a real problem, which is that even though we often don't make any progress as nations, we look to the cones within the nation to solve our problems. And many of the problems are operating multinationally, so we can't solve them at the level of our local politics.
Mm-hmm.
How we address that is uh, extremely uncertain. But one question I wanted to ask as well is, what do you think new waves of artificial intelligence will do to this? Because it seems like the ability to give people distorted information about reality and to have machines make up extremely persuasive arguments is just going to increase. We have this ability to automate the subtle manipulation of human minds now. Is that going to massively make the cone problem worse? And is it also possible that like AIs might develop cone type systems within themselves?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think that, this is something I wrote in my book, which is, we are intelligent enough to build a chainsaw, but too juvenile to run around with one. And I feel this is our case with AI. We were smart enough to build or start building one. Now it's building itself, right? So we have actually completely lost control, in my mind, in my understanding of where it's going and what it's doing, even though we're still trying to navigate it, and some are trying to use it to their benefit. Actually, when something like this goes out of control, you can only guess where it's going and what it's going to do. I'm not a doomsayer by nature, so I am an optimistic person. I do believe the reason I wrote this book is not so that we get depressed and feel that there's no way out of it. But, if you read it to the end, you will see that there are ways out of it, and it is in our control. Even the big one that's all multi-layered and invisible, etc., is still not at the immediate level, but at the long-term level, we can topple that as well, or outgrow it, right? Not topple, but outgrow it. But, what the AI is going to do, I think that the AI is a double-edged sword. We can use it to do amazing things. Like, I'm not an opponent to AI. Like, I don't, AI doesn't, as in itself, doesn't scare me. I think this is our next level of a tool. So long as we remember it is a tool, right? And we use it as a tool in this with all the safety measures as you use a chainsaw, right? When you build a chainsaw, you also have a whole manual of how to operate it, how not to let it go out of control, which side of it you should hold and which side you shouldn't, like all of these things. You have to put the safeguards. The same thing with AI. If we don't put the safeguards on this very clever machine, we will end up, we will let it cut our hands off, right? That's the problem. And so we need to be smart enough and intentional enough to put all these safeguards and decide what it is that we want AI to do and what it is that we will not allow it to do, because it is not in anyone's benefit, not us as human beings, not the earth, not the environment, let alone anything else spiritual that we haven't even touched upon, right? But so I believe in the good that we can have from AI, but of course it is a dangerous tool, and in the wrong hands, like any other tool, think about atomic energy, we can energize the world or blow it up with that same solution. So our caution needs to be about the people and the who is allowed to do what with that. That's our worry, not the technology itself. The technology it's not a sentient being. It's not. It's a tool, but it can be a destructive tool. So we need to put measures of control, and not in a bad way, but safety, right? Like in any dangerous tool. Yeah.
I'm curious about these core certainties because it seems like that covers a lot of potential territory. I was sort of
Mm.
thinking of things. Some of them are like deep enculturation, like maybe I believe it's essential to have a relationship with a higher power. Some of them seem more like evolutionary psychology. Like I have these deep set brain emotions that tell me it's important to privilege my bloodline over strangers. And some of them are maybe almost ontological in how fundamental they are, like that I perceive objects as objects and that I believe that logical identities are logical identities, things like that. I'm curious how you think about the internal differentiation within the field of core certainties. Do you see subtypes within the tier of core certainties?
You know, for our convenience as thinking human beings, it is always easier to categorize, right? It just makes it easier for us to understand things. So, in my book, I did try to categorize these core certainties. So some are like our life circumstances that inform the things that we believe in, that not just believe, that we are certain about, right? Because maybe for those who haven't read the book, I will say a few words about what core certainties are. So, there are beliefs that we believe or don't believe, but beliefs are like weaker things because today we can believe and tomorrow we don't. Core certainties are those things that we are so sure about that there's just no questioning them. So I'll give you a simple example. The earth is around, it's a sphere. It is not flat. And so, if tomorrow you meet a flat earther, you will say, I don't even want to discuss this with you because that's ridiculous. Yeah. Or if you believe that the earth is an inanimate object, it's just a rock that happens to inhabit some life on it. And I will come and tell you, well, actually, earth is Gaia. It is a living being. It is a sentient being. It has feelings, it has intelligence, and we are part of it. And those people who don't believe in that will say, well, what were you smoking and where can I get some? Right? So core certainties are those things that you just don't question. They are so obvious that any child should see, right? But because our mind is a psychedelic place, and actually we create our own realities of what we see as reality. Our reality is painted with our life experiences. It is painted with our personal traits, our personality. Are we anything. It is painted with our economic constructs, right? There are core certainties of communism, and there are core certainties of capitalism, and one will not convince the other that the other is wrong. There are the governance model, the religions that you spoke about. A person who grew up into a religion, there's no arguing with them. Cult. Once you're inducted, induced, English, into a cult, there's no reasoning with you. Your core certainties that the leader is a deity that's it. And so I think it's easy for us to categorize them based on where they're coming from, but eventually they become one big lump that, for convenience, we can break them down, but that lump is our reality. And the problem with our core certainties is because we are so certain, it is very difficult to persuade us that there can be another reality. And I think that is the source of so many conflicts of both interpersonal, intergroup, inter-ethnicities, religions, etc. It is the fact that we hold to our truth. We will not just argue for it, some of us will kill and die for it, right? And the other guy feels the exact same thing about their core certainties. But again, I think it all comes from our educational environment. And I don't just mean the educational system, but who educates us in formal and informal ways. If we are educated in a punitive environment, where this is the core certainty, you do not ask questions, you do not doubt them, they will be written in stone. That's it. But if you grow up in an environment and you have the personality of a shit stirrer, and you do ask the difficult questions, and you do look at everything through a questioning lens and a doubtful lens, and you're like, okay, I know this is a spherical stone, piece of rock that rotates around the sun, whatever, but maybe it's also a living being. How can you prove to me that it isn't? Let's ask these questions. If you have that openness, then your core certainties will be very loose and evolving. And that's what we want. We want to be loose and evolving with our core certainties. And we will always need them, because otherwise life will be so chaotic, we won't be able to stand it, right? We won't be able to put our right foot in front of the left. We need certainties, but we need evolving certainties. That's the key to growth.
Yeah, I heard a story about Benjamin Franklin, which was that he'd grown up believing that black people couldn't do math. And then he heard that there was a school teaching that. And so he rode for 3 days and went to the school and saw that it was obviously succeeding and they could learn math just fine, and then changed his mind on that. So we want to be able to culturally set up a condition in which we hold our core certainties with a little bit more flexibility and wiggle room. But then we get to this, like, coming from that to the problem level is very interesting, because it seems like we know our core certainties, but there's a lot more guesswork involved in what our problems actually are. And we're not always very good at recognizing and articulating the problems that we actually face. And we tend to use categories and forms of expression that we pick up from other people or from the media and things like that. What would you say are some principles, if there are any, for getting better at evaluating and clarifying what our actual problems are?
Yes, you're right. Problems can be so difficult to pinpoint, even though we think that they are obvious, right? Because, first of all, many times we confuse problems with their symptoms, right? So if you have a headache, is this a problem? Well, it will feel like a problem, right? Definitely. But if you feel that this is a problem and you identify it as the problem, then the solution that you will be looking for will be something. So your need will be to alleviate the pain, right? If pain is the problem, the need is to make the pain go away. Then the solution based on that need will be find a painkiller, right? That's very simple. And we see that's actually how our modern medicine is working, based on symptoms. Oh, you have this, I'll put a Band-Aid on it. You have a headache, I'll give you a. But of course, a headache is a symptom. It is, yes, it feels like a problem. And yes, it is a problem, but it's a secondary problem. But the core problem is something is causing your headache. It can be stress, it can be dehydration, it can be a tumor, or anything in between. And if you only keep taking the pain medication, then you will keep treating symptoms and you will never solve the problem. And one of the ways, I guess, to deal with it, again, I go back to developing your critical thinking, developing the questioning ability. But it's also getting into the habit of this series of questions. So there's like a method that you can develop. For example, I have this problem. Traffic drives me nuts. Yeah? Traffic is my problem. Or is it that I'm going nuts is my problem? And if I'm going nuts, and that's a symptom of what? Perhaps I suffer from stress. Perhaps I have a problem regulating my emotions. Why is that? Is that a symptom or is that the problem? Why do I have a difficulty regulating my emotions? Let's go back and inquire. I have a childhood trauma. I was never appreciated or whatever, right? How do I treat that? And so the solution to road rage is not never going into traffic, because that's just not doable, right? Unless you become recluse. But the solution is to find where the core problem is and then treat the problem at the core, just like with the headache. Treat the stress, drink water, treat your tumor or whatever the problem is. So there are systems that we can, like inquiry systems, that we can train ourselves to use as a habit of thought. My boss is out to get me. That's a problem. What is the core of this problem? Is it me? Maybe. Is it them? Is it my sensitivity? Are we seeing things differently? Do I have a fragile ego and I cannot take any kind of feedback, right? So there are ways to go about it, but again, it comes back to a disciplined mind. And it starts with awareness, right? So there are ways to improve ourselves. There are ways to improve the solutions that we come up with, just based on questioning what really is the need. And then there's the other question of who needs us to have that problem? Who benefits from us having that problem? That's another question, right? That goes to the core. who benefits from selling us painkillers instead of treating our core issues of our headache? Well, guess. Who benefits from creating laws that prohibit us from fixing our electronic devices? Those who sell them to us. Who benefits from creating laws that don't allow us to grow fruits and vegetables in our front yard, or flowers for bees, because then it is considered chaos and neglect, and the city will give you a fine? Who lobbied for this, right? So when we start asking these difficult questions of who benefits from it, really not us, who makes money or power from it, and is this actually a problem or a symptom, we will get to better places.
Okay, good. It seems like most people have a collection of fairly straightforward problems and needs, right? Hydration, food, stress relief, status, sex, rest, stimulation. But some people seem to have an additional, almost abstract kind of existential problem that they're trying to solve, which doesn't get solved by getting any of their particular needs met. In fact, the more things they succeed at accomplishing, the more they feel like there's an outstanding problem in a general non-local sense. And this can create a gap between them and other members of their community, members of their family who don't recognize that same outstanding problem. I don't know if it's quite the same as this, but I got this image in my mind of these studies that were done on rats years ago where the rat can press a lever in a complicated pattern and get a little drop of dopamine in its brain. And it can figure out almost any pattern, no matter how complicated it is. But if you give it a random pattern that it can never solve, it will just press the lever until it dies. Because there's some problem outside of its options, outside of the catalog of the needs that it could meet. I'm curious how you think about this. Like, let's say the meta problem of a problem that no need can satisfy, that often drives people to existentialism or Buddhism or something like that. A mystery problem.
Yeah. I think these are the best ones, though. I mean, I think it's those kinds of problems. Well, they can kill us or make us, right? They can turn us into that mouse who keeps, repeating the same thing, hoping for a different outcome, but getting the same shitty outcome. And a lot of us get caught in it and get depressed and develop anxiety and dissatisfaction. Some even, terminate their lives because of that frustration, or stop pressing and just roll over, right? So that is one response to that. But there's another response, which hopefully more and more people will find their way to that response. And it is looking beyond the lever. It is realizing that you are in a cage, you are given patterns by someone who benefit in some way from you pressing that lever, right? And all you need to do is let go of the lever and let go of the patterns and say, you know what, I'll find other ways to get that dopamine. Screw you, right? And I think that is that next level of the self-discovery, where we let go of the cone that tells us only this way will you have happiness. Only if you believe in my God will your soul be saved. Only if you vote for my party will your life become better. Only if, so all of these things are cones that tell us, keep pressing the lever, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. Oh, it didn't work for you? Too bad, so sad. Keep pressing the lever. It's probably you, it's not me, right? So that's how the cone works. So for us, what we need to do is we need to step out of that matrix. I always remember, by the way, I love the Matrix, the first one, where there's that scene in the subway. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a beautiful scene in the subway where Neo, so he's the one who's sort of awakened from the Matrix, and he knows that this is just a program. And he fights Smith, right? One of the agents, which to me is like a representative of the cone. And at first he fights and fights, and then he's like, but he's not real. This is just in my head. And then he starts just touching him, and then eventually he's like looking at this agent, and that agent is like doing all the things in the air but doesn't touch him, because he had realized that this is a sham. This is a mirage, right? And all you have to do is step away from that rat lever and walk away, right? So it's the same thing with cones. Now, some are easier said than done because, if you live in North Korea, you may realize that you're a rat on the lever, but leaving is a whole other thing. But you can leave internally. You can disengage internally. You can still play the role just to survive, but you don't have to keep being the subject, right? Internally, you can liberate yourself. So our solution is to liberate ourselves, is to walk away from all that experimental setting of the rat and say, this is not real. This is the shadows on the wall, in that allegory. I don't want that. I'm walking away, right? And again, easier said than done, but done by so many, meaning possible. That's our solution.
It reminded me of this idea of theory of mind that they have in cognitive science, or you have to be able to picture that there's some other intelligence doing something, that this system is maybe for someone's benefit. So you're not just looking at your own experience, you're remembering the other, and that the other has this agency that's relative to you. And like you say, sort of waking up to the illusory elements and becoming liberated from them. But there's also a danger in that of kind of exaggerated conspiracy thinking, which is tricky because there are real conspiracies. But people have this tendency to pull back from things that are real, thinking that it's the Matrix, thinking that, all of this is just conspiracy and illusion, and therefore I shouldn't take any of it seriously when a lot of it's real. How do we get that balance right?
Oof, that is tough. It's really tough because I think the key here is what emotions you engage when you disconnect, and that's what I started with at the very early stages of our conversation. Is you asked how do we build, why do we keep building the next cone and the next cone? And I said it's because we take all this negativity with us and we bring it into the next thing. And it's the same here. What do you do? How do you respond when you find out that someone you really believed in and trusted lied to you, but lied like badly, exploited you, abused you, right? Used your trust to betray you. That really creates very powerful emotions. And when you have these emotions of being betrayed by someone that you believed in or something, a system, right? A person, a group, people react in different ways. Some people will shut down and they will be the mouse that rolled over, and they just become depressed. They don't want to engage with the world. They no longer know what to believe in. And there are a lot of us that are in that place right now. There are others who are so fueled with anger and vengeance that they are looking for ways to get the steam out, for ways to, and many do it with the best of intentions. Like if you look at social justice movements, even something as recent as cancel culture, right? Cancel culture has a very good origin in the sense of, if you're an asshole, if you are harmful, if you are an oppressor, we will call you on it and we will cancel you, right? So that you lose your power to abuse. So there's a good origin there. But because it comes with so much angst and piss and vinegar, it turns into its own cone. It turns into this uncontrollable guillotine where I will cut anyone's head if you just utter the wrong syllable, right? Because that's what the cancel culture has become. It has become punitive. It has become judgmental. It has become a new silencing tool that came from social justice. So when we bring these sentiments into the next stage, that's what we create, right? We create the next hateful thing, the next cone. And then there's the third way, which is, I would say, still just a trickle, sadly. But hopefully, people like me, obviously people like you, and many others who are in that awakened realm, I would say, would encourage people to leave these things behind. If you're the rat with the lever, you may be resentful to having been used and exploited and shamed, and you may decide to go after the psychologist who who set up the experiment and tried to bite their ass. Or you can say, I don't need that bullshit. I'm walking away. Look at this beautiful world outside the box with the patterns. This is the world that I want to live in. Let me find little rats just like myself who have come out of these boxes and are looking to build something new. And we will treat our trauma. We will find ways to forgive, not to excuse, not to confuse forgiveness with excusing. Forgive for our own sake so that we don't carry that with us, and find that beauty and optimism and the renewal and build something beautiful and new that will never harm, that will never exploit, that is the only way outside of that box. And the more of us that will understand that that is the only way, not the vengeance, not the rolling over, the better this world will be. And there are already so many small communities, so many initiatives, so many supportive organizations that are building that. We just haven't heard of them, most of us, because we still live in cones that keep that out of our purview, right? We don't know they're there. So there are ways out of that lever thing.
You talk in the book about the difference between manufactured needs and natural needs. And what would you say manufactured needs have in common that makes them as a group different than natural needs? Is there any way to look at a need and tell which kind it is?
Yeah. Sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's harder, just because some of them are so sophisticated and so ancient, right? That we don't even remember that someone manufactured them. So manufactured needs can be, and again, I go back to that, who's profiting from that? It's that core question of, so one thing, what happens if I ignore that need? What will happen to me? And I'll give you an example. The whole, as a woman especially, but as men as well right now, there's this whole beauty industry, right? That is all about, you're not enough. You're not enough. You're not beautiful enough. You're not white enough. You're not young enough. You're not slim enough. You're not fit enough. Just not enough, generally speaking. right? And this is a manufactured need that sort of augmented an existing need. We even in nature, like animals, they choose the beautiful, what they consider the beautiful members, because they consider this beauty to be connected with favorable DNA traits of being strong and healthy and what have you, and reproductive. So it is sort of a natural need, but it's a natural need that we could easily educate people to have a lessened importance, right? Just like we teach everything else that may be primal, like, ooh, I want your cake, I'm going to grab it. Well, we teach that that's not okay. And then we know it's not okay and we don't do it. And the same thing with the beauty standard. It's not who we are and what we are and how I'm supposed to be judged by the world, whether I'm beautiful or not, or young or not. But then the question is, who's making money out of it? Who's benefiting from me feeling not enough, not beautiful enough, not white enough, not. So if we don't ask these questions, we never know. And I will go to a difficult one, or the one that will get me canceled somewhere. I go back to COVID, right? Because this is sort of a recent and radical example of what happened in the world, where I'm not saying that, curing the disease was a manufactured need. I won't go into the conspiracies of, someone spread the disease, or like, who knows? I don't know. I won't go there. Even if it was completely natural, a mistake, an accident, whatever, there was a disease. People were dying of the disease. It was a problem and we had a need. But that need was manufactured in a way that there should only be one solution, right? Our need is to find a vaccine. That was how the need was framed. And anyone who said, but listen, I've been treating my patients with COVID with these simple ways, simple treatments, no vaccine, and within 3 days, if you catch it early enough, they would recover. No need for an unknown, untested vaccine. They would be canceled, they would be censored, they would lose their jobs, right? So there was this, suddenly the cone of modern medicine revealed its face of an oppressive cone. And then you're asking, who makes the money? Who benefits from it? Well, it doesn't take a genius to realize who benefits from it, right? The ones who make money off of it. The ones who say, oh, 1 dose is not enough, let's do 3. You know what? 4. You know what? Every 6 months we'll give you a booster. Right? So, and then you're like, but there's research that's showing there are problems. People are dying. There are side effects. Shh. What side effects, you conspiracy theorist, you anti-vaxxer? How dare you? Right? So there are ways to figure. Sometimes they are glaring. They are staring at us. The fact that it is a manufactured need or a manufactured solution. We just have to have the courage to ask, follow the money, follow the power. Is there someone who's benefiting it and not necessarily me, right? But again, we need courage for that, because we know what happens to heretics in cones. So there are ways, it's just painful.
COVID is an interesting example because it sort of shows this tendency in the population to split into two big teams, right? One team says everyone else is just crazy or misinformed. You've all got to take this one vaccine regardless of anything else you've heard. And the other team says that's a conspiratorial move and we don't actually need to do anything about this fake situation.
Yeah.
Now, and almost everything that comes up, whether it's the election or Ukraine or Israel and Hamas, there always seem to be two main teams.
Yeah.
Is that, in your mind, is that sort of two cones competing? Or is it something like every cone kind of has two heads, like it kind of creates a two-team situation wherever it goes?
Oh, awesome question. Um, I think it can be both cases. One case is that, yes, there are competing cones, right? So you spoke earlier about the conspiracy theorists. And it is so difficult to know because, yeah, there are actual conspiracies, right? And so if there are actual conspiracies, which one is not? It's like anyone's guess. And the more you are within a cone that is anti-establishment, and you can be anti-establishment as a non-coned person, right? Just an enlightened person who says, I don't want this controlling thing. I don't, I want to be a free thinker, a free, or you can be in that competing cone that says they are bad and therefore we are right. And because we are the exact opposite, right? We are right. So whatever they're saying must be a lie and therefore must be a conspiracy. And what we need is we cannot trust anyone. We have to, I don't know what, collect weapons because we need to protect ourselves from these government, whatever. Like it can go really far, right? On the scale of insanity. And the way we know it's a cone, it's another cone, is again the dynamics that happens inside these groups. When you are in that group and you are not allowed to say, but maybe they are right, can we listen to them? Because then you're the heretic, right? They will shame you, they will punish you, you're in a cone, right? So and the more one cone becomes more extreme, I call it the evil twins phenomenon. It's the more the right wing becomes extreme, the more the left wing becomes extreme. The more one side says no, give vaccines, the more the people who don't believe in vaccines are saying vaccines are of the devil, right? So there's they push each other like magnets with the wrong polarity that just push one another into their own extremes. And that is a very unfortunate phenomenon that we see a lot. And it's also what happened, for example, with communism and capitalism, right? The more socialism became communism, the more free market became predatory capitalism, right? They just pushed each other to extremes. And then there are the freestanding thinkers, right? The freestanding thinkers are always at risk of creating their own cones. But, hopefully not too many. I'll give you an example of people who wouldn't believe that they are a cone because they believe that they are free thinkers. Scientists. I'm a scientist, by the way. That's my history. I'm a scientist. I grew up within science until I discovered scientism, where you can't really doubt some of the core certainties of science because everything is physical and everything is measurable. And if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. It's bogus, right? Or there's only one way to treat that, to measure that. There's not, the other way is like the stupid way. And what happens is that even the most advanced thinkers can fall into that trap. So scientists is one group. Another group is, oh my God, the word eludes me. The people who don't believe in religion. Atheists. Sorry. So atheists believe that they are very enlightened beings. People who are spiritual sometimes get their ego take over their spiritualism. And then it's not spirituality, it is spiritualism, right? Uh, just like people who say, oh, people who believe in God and in, all these things are stupid. But then try and discuss with them spirituality, and you discover the cone, right? With atheists, because atheism is a cone in and of itself. So escaping a cone is art. It is art, and it is continuous questioning of, here are the 10 things that if I say yes on them, I'm in a cone, right? So we need to know these criteria. That's why also, by the way, I developed the diagnostic, the cone diagnostic. I don't know if you want me to talk about it or not.
I do, but my question, what's coming up for me right now is, okay, so we need to make these cultural changes, right? The culture has to uh, allow people freedom to change their core certainties. We have to be teaching ourselves and each other, possibly through the education system, to be better at continuous questioning, both of our own assumptions, but also of how other people are benefiting from the things that we think are obvious social moves. But a lot of it also seems like it might just be desperation and stress and difficult living circumstances that make people, they just don't have the room or flexibility or time to engage in questioning. Whether it's UBI or something else, do you think there's a way of taking the pressure off people so that their lives aren't as desperate, so that they're available to begin a deeper inquiry as to the cones that they're in?
Yeah, that would be ideal, right? What happens is that cones intentionally create environments where you cannot think. Not only that you're not allowed, because most of us don't even know that we're not allowed, but that you don't have the time, you don't have the energy. You are in that perpetual chase after the next thing, after your career. It's not enough, right? You don't have enough time for leisure, and when you do have time for leisure, all you do is watch the TV, right? It's the distraction. It's this, I call it stupefying. So cones have a way of stupefying us, and they benefit from their subjects being stupefied. So they give us slogans, like empty slogans that mean absolutely nothing. One of the funniest ones is Brexit, right? It's like, I don't know who's the genius who thought about it, but it worked, right? So it's like empty slogans. It's thought terminating things like, it's the will of God. That's it. No questions asked. It's the will of God. It's the will of God. They entertain us. So it's the bread and circuses, right? That distract us from the things that truly matter. It's the making us work 8-10 hours a day and be thankful that we have the 1 hour left to buy our food and watch TV, right? So the distraction and the overload are intentional. They are not, and I know it sounds like a conspiracy, but it is the modus operandum of cones on any scale. Make you miserable enough so that you just comply, you just survive, you don't become a thinking, questioning, doubting human being. How do we counteract that? Here's the thing. Many of us say the system is broken, but that's not true. The system is not broken. The system works as intended, right? The system is oppressive. That's another thing. But it's not broken in the sense that it's waiting for us to fix it. It doesn't want to be fixed because it benefits from us being in it and operate the way it operates as a parasite, right? A parasite is not a broken organism that is looking for redemption. A parasite knows what it's doing and it will keep doing it, and you will not convince it to do otherwise. So the solution is not to try and fix it from the inside because it is fix resistant, right? Most of it. Some rare cases may evolve, but usually it won't. So the solution is not to try and burn it and not to try and fix it, but to leave it, right? To leave it. And in order to leave, as you said earlier, you need to have that emotional space and capacity and the intellectual space and capacity to breathe, to look at it as you would look at a matrix, to call it what it is, to understand what it's doing to you, and then leave. And on the very basic level, because we keep speaking about the big systems, I want to bring back the cone into the smallest scale. The very smallest scale is a single individual. We embody the cones in our lives. We punish ourselves. We feel guilty about things. We feel insufficient. So we are sort of the inner mirror of all our cones. Even that, for us, forget about stepping out of world economies. Stepping out of our own internalized cones is a journey. And this journey needs a mind space. Sometimes it needs hitting rock bottom, right? Where it's the only way is up or die kind of thing. So that's the smallest. But I will give the next one, which is a relationship between two people. And I think for most people, it is easier to understand that than speaking about educational, medical, and economical systems, which many people feel is beyond them and not their business, right? But think about a relationship with another individual. A cone is an abusive relationship. And do we all know that we are in an abusive relationship? No. Many of us don't. Many of us, because the abuser is usually a very sophisticated individual, not always the smartest, not always the most intelligent, but just like a predator that knows how to prey on its prey. An abuser knows how to get their hand into our mind and scramble it so that we feel insufficient, so that we feel that everything is our fault, that we feel that everything that's wrong with our relationship is me, not you, that it's that gaslighting, it's that keeping me unsure about your intentions, keeping me scared of you, right? So that kind of relationship, that's a typical cone on a small scale. And so I'll go back to your question. How do we leave? How do we wake up? How do we leave such a relationship? Well, first of all, we need to know this is what's happening to us, right? How many people are in a relationship with a narcissistic abuser and don't know it? I was raised by two of them, and I didn't know it until I almost turned 60. So more than 5 decades, I was not aware of it, right? And then something happened, a memory opened, I had to take care of my trauma, and then all the pieces suddenly fell into place. But it took more than 5 decades to realize that, right? So it's not always easy. Sometimes I would call it divine intervention, Kairos time, it's the time for our evolution. And suddenly our eyes open, suddenly something happens. our eyes open to reality, and we see what it is. And hopefully, one of my hopes with the cone model is that it will give people language as well, sort of taxonomy, right? So that people will say, I need to relook at my core certainties. I need to understand that this is a cone, and I can answer 12 questions and know that this is a cone. And if this is a cone and it's controlling me, what now for me? And some people will say, there's no other way for me. I'll just stay here and suck it up, right? And other people will say, there must be something else in life. I will leave and I will take my chances. So that's the process. And I think, again, it's easier to understand this when we think about just a relationship versus world systems. But it works in the exact same way on every scale. Yeah.
So you mentioned 12 questions, and you've got a kind of a diagnostic tool for approaching cones. Where do people go to access this diagnostic tool? But also, what are you probing for with these questions? What kind of information is it pertinent to elicit from people in order to help them with this?
So these questions sort of look at the different layers of the cone model and the different behaviors that we see from abusers. And there are slightly different diagnostics for an individual, which you can find on my website, and it's free. You can download, it's free, and it's a partial, it's a diagnostic of figuring out your vulnerability to manipulators. So one is understanding yourself. How vulnerable are you to people who can then easily manipulate you based on these vulnerabilities? And once you understand these vulnerabilities, by God, treat them. Treat them, because parasites can smell blood in the water, right? Okay, now I mixed metaphors. Sharks can smell blood in the water. And so so first of all, it's for us to understand our own vulnerabilities. Then there's the second layer, which is in the book. There's a few questions where you can ask yourself the question of who might be your cones. So you ask yourself questions. Who are the people or organizations that you revere beyond questioning, right? That's one red flag. Who do you believe in and trust with your life? And it can be a good person, right? So that's not the only thing. But someone that you trust with your life creates an opening for exploitation, right? If you never question them, if you always believe in them. Then there are questions that are related to whom are you not allowed to question? What happens when you question? And even then there's that subsection, okay, maybe you're not the questioning type, and so you wouldn't know. Do you know someone else who dared question that person or organization or system and paid dearly for it in some shape or form, right? And then there are questions that are related to toxicity, to things of enforcement. How is it enforced? Is it peer enforcement? Is it like snitching, right? That's a good sign of a cone. Is it self-enforcement where you do self-flagellations for being a heretic, right? That's a sign of a cone. So there are different facets and different layers. There are questions related, as I said, to toxicity, so to gaslighting, right? Do you see any of these behaviors from this individual? What will happen? Are you allowed to leave this system, individual? What will happen to you if you leave? What kind of punishment will you get if you decide to leave? So these are all cute. These are all red flags that as you go through them one by one, they accumulate into a bigger picture, right? So one of the things that I'm working on now is actually beyond what you can already get for free on my website and you can read in my book, is I'm creating diagnostics, which is like a workbook where you will be able, so there will be one workbook for yourself, self-diagnostic, like an in-depth self-diagnostic that actually asks not just about vulnerabilities, but also inquires about for you to dig deep into what your core certainties are. Where did they come from? What happens if you question them, right? Who wants you to have them? So it's that kind of deep digging into ourselves and our world and our own cone. Then there will be another one that is a relationship diagnostic. And a relationship is not necessarily a romantic relationship. It can be a friendship. It can be a parent-child. It can be business relationship with another individual. So any interpersonal relationship. And then there will be one for family. And there's already one for organizations that I've already piloted with one organization, where organizations are asking the question, am I a cone? I don't want to be. What are the signs of me coning the system? How can I reverse it? And of course, this is not a diagnostic that organizations that are already full-blown cones and know it will take because they want to be. They don't see it as a problem. But there are a lot of organizations like and nonprofits, even for profits, charities that really are looking to be new and better and growing and non-oppressive and non-harmful. But they need this diagnostic to know that they're not falling into old patterns. Yeah, so there are different ways.
Well, this has been wonderful. I enjoyed the book. I thought it was a really nice mixture of simple and straightforward and rich and complex at the same time.
Oh, thank you.
I find your spirit of heresy refreshing. And I think in addition to, changes in the education system and changes in the cultural ethos, we need, 10,000 Navas. We need a whole type of
And
person
Layman's.
specializing in cone analysis, the way we have psychoanalysis. We need people
Yes,
to therapeutically help everyone else move through these things.
yes.
Oh,
And
thank you
so
very much. I've had a great fun.
thank you. So one more thing that I wanted to say based
Hmm.
on what you just said that I remembered, my really big next project
Hmm.
is another book that will be called Controversial, based on the same play on words. And what I'm hoping to do, you said 10,000 Navas. We need 10,000 wonderful people. What I'm looking for is to create teams of great thinkers in different areas. So a team that are great thinkers on economy, and a team of great thinkers on healthcare and medicine and healing, and a team of great thinkers on education. And with each team, I am hoping for that to facilitate this cone diagnostic of the systems that exist right now. And then have these, as objective as possible, outcomes of here is the economic system. Here's this governance system. Analyzed with this tool that answers to 48 criteria, right? And scored, and there's a percentage. So this system is 67% cone, and that system is 89% cone. And then collect it into one book called Controversial, because these will be controversial works, but very necessary ones, where there will be 1,000, not Navas, but even smarter people than myself in different areas. Hopefully you will be interested, where we will be able to herald this into the world from small to big in the different systems that we are currently living, measured through a tool, right? Through a cone tool. Yeah, that's my vision.